Hello and welcome to the intersection on Politics Social. I'm joined by Rachel Harris. How you doing, Rachel? Are you okay?
Oh, I'm up and down like most of us at the moment. terror in America, kind of disappointment in the UK. I mean, I don't know. It's all kind of it's it's the walking in the garden and looking at flowers that keeps me going at the moment.
Yeah. Well, we've got Michael Warner in the chat. We've got Billy Kershaw. We've got Vendetta. We've got our own. We've got Clupid, Blue Popey, and we've got Katrina and others. I would like to say that we were going to make this members only for the chat, but then we thought that was a bit unfair on people who are patrons and also people who are on the channel who possibly can't afford to get a membership. So we've made it so subscribers only, but you got to be subscribed for an hour, so no one can turn up and just decide to say what they want.
Casually attack the trans person online.
Yes, so we'll have no transphobia in the chat. Thank you. So it's been a bit of a hard, bumpy landing, hard landing, crash landing.
Pull up, terrain.
Okay. Do you want to go through it?
So I mean, what we'll do is we'll go through a number of things. I think the fact is that. Parliament-wise, 46 LGBT MPs in Labour, pretty good.
Fantastic.
In the Tories, 4. The Lib Dems have got 5. Refuck, obviously, 0.
60% of them went to private school now.
Yeah,
and 60% of them worked in the city of London and made their money that way.
Always a problem.
So before we go on, Alec Barris just dropped us chatting. Private Eye have acknowledged my email, which is cool. That's from Alec. I've left my copy of today's Private Eye in the other room, so I can't run and get it. Well, I possibly could, but it'd be a bit rude. Anyway, Rachel, go on. Thanks, Alec.
We're talking about Labour, so I want to talk about all the LGBT stuff that Labour could have done and probably won't. The stuff that they and obviously and the puberty blockers is coming in as a shit sandwich right in the middle of all the other stuff we're talking about. So it's there. So because obviously we want to talk about that. But the Labour language, obviously from a trans point of view and from an LGBT point of view, after 14 years of the Conservatives, we thought that Labour would be a firewall and draw a line under all this shittery. We know when you look at the big picture in America and Eastern Europe, the route map to removing all rights is trans rights, trans kids, trans adults, same-sex marriage, women's rights, right? And that's what they're punching out in America in real time. So the attack on trans kids is coming, right now, and we're going to talk about the puberty blocker thing. So we kind of thought that Labour would be the firebreak, right? Because they're sensible. They've always been, the unions love trans people, and they generally do in the UK. Lots of trans people are in unions, and we thought Labour would. But as of course, Labour's sort of moved middle right, and the left of the Labour is not quite there anymore. And I worked really hard, as we all did, to get Labour elected. We wanted to destroy the Tories. And I've got friends in Labour, and we were all like, it's all going to be unicorn shit and horns when they get in. I mean, okay, we didn't think it was going to be that, but we thought it was going to be better, right? And then in the last sort of 6 months, as the campaign started up, we hear Keir say adult human female and, the words, and you think, oh, well, that's a bit of a dog whistle. Trans people recognize that. Then you get Tony Blair, man has a penis and a woman has a vagina. So you're reducing people to their sexual organs. And that was, not great. No. Then we start to see, well, women need to be protected, linking the protection of women with trans people. Now, women need to be protected from misogyny and men and all that stuff. But trans people aren't the risk to women. But that language starts to creep in. Then you see Keir saying, women don't have, right just before the end, the question of J.K. Rowling's question on, whatever it was, the Times Radio, or trans women don't have a right to single sex spaces, even with a gender recognition certificate. So what the fuck is the point of a gender recognition certificate if you're can't be? So
this is guilty before being proved innocent, which is what J.K. Rowling wants for black people. Sorry, trans people. Yeah. Sorry, it'd be tremendously racist if she thought that about black people. Yeah. If she thought black people should just be treated as probably guilty, on the grounds that they're black.
Yeah.
That would be massively fucking racist.
Absolutely.
I don't really see much of a difference. If we take the word trans out of the equation and put in the word black,
but the government
just see the bigotry there.
But, the divide and conquer. This country is a racist country. The Equality and Human Rights Commission said it wasn't, but look who commissioned that report.
Racists.
because it's divided. The attacks on disabled people.
I would say that it's not necessarily a racist country. I think it's institutionally racist.
Yes, people of the United Kingdom are.
They don't want to be seen as racist. This is why you get so many people going, "I'm not a racist," but and then they'll say something horrifically racist.
Yeah,
because they don't want to be seen as racist, even if they are.
Absolutely. So the countries generally, we know the UK is a really accepting country on most things, but the institution, the people who control the power. Racism. Let's have a crack at disabled people and take their benefits away. Let's attack trans kids, trans adults. And you see in the hard right talking about abortion and women's rights as well. So it's attack on rights across the board. Instead of we want lower taxes, we want to make pots of cash, and we don't want people to think about the environment. So let's malign all these people and blame them. So it's a strategy that they're running in America and they're running here, and we import a lot of that bigotry from America. The single sex basis stuff that Labour have started saying. Rape clinics are not dorms, right? They're separate rooms. So that was never a problem, and rape clinics handle trans women and trans people really well. We don't. Trans whip people when they go to prison don't go straight into general pot, right? There's an analysis done on everyone. What's your crime? How long have you been out? Have you got a gender certificate? There's a whole analysis done before they put you into general pot, and that was always the case. But now it's just trans women into the male pop, and then you go swimming. Every time I go swimming, there are cubicles. You're not getting changed in front of people, right?
No.
But this is created, and Labour know that.
I've not got changed in front of anyone. It's since I was a kid.
Yeah.
Since I was a child, like in school, in our swimming lessons, when we had to get changed in the same room, and everyone put like a towel around their waist.
Exactly.
And that. But I mean, just the idea that these, I guess it's people who just don't have the need to use municipal baths, because maybe like J.K. Rowling, they've got their own swimming pools. Multiple multiple yachts.
Yeah. And I've been using, God forbid, I've been using swimming pools and kind of health saunas and spas, and I've been changing in the women's changing room for all that time. Yeah. Never seen another woman. I've always been in a cubicle. So that's how they are. So it is but even if it wasn't, trans people are not the problem. It's just like gay men going to a toilet and look at all the other gay guys, and they can't play sport because they look at all. This is the sort of bigotry of the 80s. That's not how people work in their brains. So it was the disappointing language coming out of Labour. Just to start, and we knew that we were in trouble a few months before. And we were saying, oh, wow, once they're in, they're just saying that for the Times and the Telegraph, but once they're in, they'll be fine. But we'll come on to Wes. But let's just look at sort of what I'd like to do is look at the outer stuff that Labour, before they do anything for LGBT people, there's things they need to fix, bigger stuff. Like we know we need to do media reform, right? Because we know that, there's 10,000 articles in 2 years about trans people, all fake. We know, so that hasn't really gone well. We need to say, there was the Kira Bell case where she won the lower case and child care was taken away from trans kids. But then it went to a court of appeal and it was overturned by judges meeting trans people and trans parents. But that never made it into the papers. Only the lower case did. And the papers were still reporting that trans care had been banned and Kira Bell was the winner of that case. And lots of people reported some of these newspapers. And of course, do you know what? The papers retracted that and said, we got that wrong. But it was 1 inch at the back a month later, So it was, and that stuff should be out front. So we definitely need media reform. So papers cannot do this one-sided. There haven't been any trans voices in these papers since 2020. So we need.
Are there any trans MPs? Did any trans MPs get in?
Not visible trans people, no.
Wow. So that's 0 out of 650. Yeah.
So that's the first thing. Media reform is a must. Second thing, hate crime. If you're not going to do much for trans people, and I don't think they're going to, or LGBTQI people, you need to toughen up the hate crime, because the hate crime against trans people has gone up 186% in 5 years.
Because of J.K. Rowling.
Because a lot of I mean, just part of it, and she was mentioned in the ILGA report on LGBT rights in Europe falling, and she was mentioned in last year's report. The other aspect is the LGB. So it's not. Remember, I say after trans people, it's going to be gay people next. Well, their hate crime's gone up 112% in 5 years. So people are already moving. People are moving on, right? And we're seeing articles in the Pink News about gay couples getting beaten up and attacked and all that stuff coming out of venues and stuff. So they need to toughen up hate crime against LGBTQI people. Because if you're not going to do anything, what you need to do is make it, if you're going to hurt an LGBTQI person, you need to make it, you need to have a tough sentence on it, right?
Yeah.
So, and the Law Commission has already recommended sentencing for that kind of thing, which hasn't been taken up before by the previous administration. So maybe that needs to be done. Hand in hand, training court and police services on LGBTQI, looking after LGBTQI people as well, because that has drifted, right? So that's got worse. So with respect, because all you see is, oh, this trans person did something bad and I had to use their pronouns in court. Well, that is so rare. It is actually, you should be.
This is the thing. It's like, I always equate this, well, not this particular thing, but just the way that people's imaginations, let's say, or prejudices are skewed by things happening when they are one in a million. So when I said I'm going to travel around the world on my own, people said, that's stupid, Graham. It's really dangerous out there. And I'm like, is it? Like, the chances of me, something untoward happening to me while, traveling around Africa, even as a lone white man. And I agree, I think the situation might be different if I was a lone white woman going through Africa, or a woman traveling anywhere, to be honest with you. But as a lone white man, my attitude was, let's look at the statistics. It is like so few people, considering how many people go to Africa every year or go anywhere around the world, who come a cropper, who end up getting kidnapped or tortured or worse. And I just looked at it like every time something happens, like you saw with this J kid who died a couple of weeks ago in Tenerife. If something like that does happen, was it Tenerife or some other island? It's front page news for weeks because it's so goddamn unusual. I said this about the horrible killing of Jamie Bulger in Liverpool. Those kids were only a couple of years younger than me, who murdered the toddler. And it was so unusual. And it feeds into that right-wing narrative of, the streets aren't safe. You can't go out now. There are no-go zones and all this. Because they point at these one-off cases and say, that proves everything. Whereas the vast majority of child abuse happens in people's own homes. If someone means you harm in this life, I know this is a horrible thing to say, there's probably going to be someone that you know.
Absolutely.
Strangers don't run around stabbing strangers for no reason.
The media is like that, right? A white woman gets murdered and it's covered in the media, as it should be, right? But if a black woman gets murdered, it's not really covered in the media.
That's true.
It is that imbalance of the media's perception of who's important to them. Not if it's trans person.
It results in this really skewed version of the world in people's heads where they still tie complete nations 20, 30 years later to a disaster or a massacre or a genocide or something that happened 30 years ago and still think that place is dangerous because of that thing that's happening. Which is a bit like going, I'm not going to go to Liverpool because of the Hillsborough disaster. And you're like, you do know the Hillsborough Stadium's not in Liverpool, right? Yeah. It's just a bit of a,
but the media doesn't help, and that's
the media fuels it. The media fuels it.
And that when Brianna J was murdered, the first thing the media were covering, this is not a hate crime. They were platforming people saying this is not a hate crime. It mustn't be a hate crime because if it is, our narrative will look like we damaged that. We are responsible.
You're absolutely right.
So
it was a hate crime,
and it was a hate crime because the judge said it was. So it is that. So I think the charity, I think that the training of the courts, training of the police, all that kind of stuff, press regulation, charity commission is the next thing. This is all the big stuff outside Labour to be fixed. Charity commission allows an awful lot of organisations that attack trans people, a lot of them in Tufton Street, write these articles, and they're not charities. They shouldn't be getting, and the charity commission needs to hold these people up to say, is it charitable to attack trans people all the time? Write articles about attack trans people. No, it's not charitable. The clue is in the word charitable. So they need to do something about the charity commission. Then Ofcom, obviously there are television broadcasters, I'm not going to name them because I don't want to get attacked by them, but they are, who they are, who just platform anti-trans stuff all the time. And there's almost no counter. Ofcom need to do something about that, and that just means take the just restructure at the top. And then finally, on the big stuff outside Labour, but they need to deal with, is they need a definition of transphobia in their own party. Now, all the other parties like Liberal Democrats and Greens, they have a definition of what that is. If Labour had a definition of transphobia, then some of the problems that Labour have got wouldn't be a problem, if you know what I mean. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink.
I didn't know this. So they don't have a definition for their party, because this was an issue, wasn't it, with anti-Semitism?
Yeah,
where they came up with a list of things that were anti-Semitic, and the previous leader of the opposition objected to it, which didn't really help the whole thing of like, we think Labour is a bit anti-Semitic, and he's like, no, we're not. But
well, I couldn't find one.
This isn't anti-Semitism.
If there is one, I apologize, but I couldn't find one when I looked, and I asked a few of my Labour friends, and they couldn't find one, and they didn't know of one. If it exists, I mean, there's a new LGBT Labour group on the side just popped up, because LGBT Labour is considered. I know to be fair to them, they have challenge wares, which we're going to come to, and they have written some letters out. But there's another LGBT Labour group. I think I posted it the other day, that's popped up, which is independent of the official Labour LGBT group. So we'll see if that is going to be a bit more gritty.
Yes.
Okay, so what can Labour do? So let's look at some stuff, some gritty, nitty gritty stuff. So on the outside, because this is LGBTQI, right? So they should look at same-sex IVF, right? That would be really, really good. Yeah. And also adoption for same-sex couples is a bit of a nightmare. The education on that is a bit difficult. So the process needs to be streamlined, supported by the government, because obviously if another hard right government comes in 5 years' time, same-sex marriage, same-sex adoption, IVF, all that stuff will get. So I think you need to embed that, and you need to hardwire that.
If we're going to do something about the fertility rate in the UK, having more easily, making it easier for gay couples, lesbian couples, bisexual couples, trans couples to adopt and to have children of their own through IVF seems like a no-brainer to me. If that's the aim. Yeah,
absolutely. There was also this achievement of removing HIV to zero by 2030, by far the action plan, and roll out PrEP freely and easily. Again, I think Labour needs to continue to support that and fund it and make sure that it gets to its deadlines. It feels like the energy's gone a bit out of that, and I think that will be.
It was mentioned in the King's speech, though, wasn't it, today?
I watched it with you. I didn't hear that bit. I was, but maybe I was, tuned out. I mean, I'm doing 6 things at once when I'm like you. I'm juggling and looking at my pad. The blood quarry recommendation should be they should just get on and pay all the compensation to get that done. It's not necessarily related to LGBTQI, but there are LGBTQI people in that as part of that, and I think that that should be done. Now let's get to a juicy one: banning conversion therapy, no conditions. Right?
Yes. I thought this was mentioned in the speech.
Yeah, it was, but he was sort of turning, and my government will ban conversion therapy. Turning the page, moving on really quickly. I would have liked.
They did have a lot of stuff to go through. To be fair,
no, I know.
40 new
I'd have
laws.
liked to say. I'd love to have heard the word. I'd love to have heard the King say the word transgender. I bet he's never said the word. To have said this ban will include my transgender subjects with no conditions or something, because it just says we're going to ban conversion therapy or conversion practices. Does it? Because I'm worried they'll put conditions. Well, definite ban for LGBT people, trans adults maybe, and everything else is open. Most countries have just banned it outright.
Yeah,
you can't
because it's torture, isn't it?
Yes, you can.
There's no other way of describing it.
In many countries, you can definitely, because everyone gets, the counsellor, I won't be able to counsel them. That would be No, counselling of a trans person is not conversion therapy. Helping them work out who they are on the spectrum is not conversion therapy. Helping them work through if they're trans or not is not conversion therapy. What is telling them that, oh, you are trans, you are not trans, and then, doing all the flashing lights and spinning around like Michael Caine in Funeral in Berlin or something. That's not great. It's torture. And, my partner is subject, to this, and it is a very awful, the process. It causes irreparable mental damage. And I think most countries have just banned it outright. But in this country, oh no, this is it's a bit hard. Why is it hard? Is it the will that you don't want to do it? It's because people are on attack on so many fronts. This is like they would be much happier if they could ban it for LGBT people, which is where Boris was going, but not trans people. And I worry that it will be LGBT, yes, trans a little bit. And that's where I worry.
Okay, so we need to keep the pressure on Labour, obviously. Can I be a total dick? Can I just point out it wasn't Funeral in Berlin, it was the Ipcris file.
Oh, it was the Ipcris file. The nail in the hand.
Massive nerd. My name is Harry Palmer. Someone was enjoying your take on Keir Starmer earlier, saying that you should go on Dead Ringers.
Oh,
with that impression.
Do you know my father was a tool maker? He was
a tool maker.
A tool maker.
My daddy was a tool maker. Okay, but before we go on, we'll just jump into a bit of the chat. Duke, Duke says maybe the problem is I'm outside of this particular bubble. Me not being trans or anything. My younger brother is trans though, so I know firsthand how right-wing families treat trans people, which is usually is not good.
Never good,
And Shinzed points out that the horrific murder last week of 3 women in their own home by a man wielding a crossbow. According to the Mail, it was the crossbow's fault.
Yeah.
Moonfest Madness is completely right when it says all of this trans hate reminds me of the 1980s again. What with the gay hate, etc. Totally. Someone was accusing me of not using the communal showers at Glastonbury. No, I haven't. But I have been to the communal. They've got a sauna. They've got a sauna just by the green fields. If you know where to look. There is a naked sauna. I have been to that. Very drunk. Clupid Boropope, stupid horoscope. Why are we so bad when it comes to the most basic of things? Life in this island is becoming more and more untenable. And this is something that I don't know whether it might have been Katie Montgomery or India Willoughby or someone else said the whole thing of, it might have been you actually. Rachel, saying that basically the whole thing was, it's okay, the Tories are on their way out. At some point this year, they are on their way out and they will take their cruelty, their sadism, everything with them, and then we'll have at least 5 years where we can just relax.
Ding dong, the witch is dead, the witch is witch.
and then Wes Streeting has just ridden a horse and cart through that single-handedly. And should we talk about this now? We're sort of.
All right. Well, I've got to come back to the other stuff, the big stuff. Let's go on to puberty blockers and West Streeting. I made some notes because I didn't want to forget all the stuff. I mean, the fact is, right, the report was needed because the Gender Identity Services, the Tavistock Trust, was problematic. Even trans people had a problem with that service. And we wanted a better service. And the report was... But the setup and the framing of that report and the people that got very excited about it felt like it was the wrong people. The report comes out, and when you read it, and I do advise people to look at the Helen Belcher interview that we did on The Intersection, because she really nailed all the problems with the Cash report. But the thing that always stuck with me is she said that the outcome of somebody going through it felt like the outcome of being trans was the bad outcome.
Yeah.
That was, so everything was about, are you something else? Is this going on? Could it be something? And it was all, but trans, you don't want to be trans.
And
that's where, that was the feeling. There was so much evidence, 103, I think she said there was 103 pieces of evidence, mostly international, and most of the international stuff was set aside. World Pathway of Association of Transgender Health and all that stuff. When the report came out, Amnesty International and Liberty criticized it. I mean, that was, these are not lightweight institutions, right?
Yeah.
Then you look sub-report and you see right-wingers and waving it around as the benchmark, and LGBT organizations are cautious at best. The cast. And then the way that Wes has entered this discussion, he's saying, obviously the last thing that the health secretary did. So I use this scenario to my wife. I always say, the Russians are coming up the driveway. You're the German general in the chateau, burning all the papers, getting ready to run. But the last thing you do is sign a private ban on puberty blockers before you nip out the back. I mean, it was literally that close to them not being in government. The last heinous crime. And the fact was that Cass didn't ban them. She just said you couldn't have them unless you were some sort of part of some research study. Now that's a bit flawed, right? But people already on them still continue to get them. They weren't going to issue any new ones.
That's how dangerous they are, though, Rachel.
But
they're so dangerous that if we don't stop them for not for the kids who are already on them or for
Yeah.
cisgender kids, then we just don't know what will happen to this.
No, 40 years of countries using them.
Years.
40 years of countries using them is and all the international countries that use them. The fact is that they are prescribed for what they call precocious puberty, I think it's called.
Yeah,
early
puberty.
Yeah, and so it's okay for cis kids. Now, this is the thing that Helen was saying in the previous broadcast, right? That most people that actually got puberty blockers were 14 to 16 years old. So it was already a bit late, right? We're only talking about 3,000 kids, half a million kids are born every year. Such a small number. They don't all get puberty blockers, right? It's hard. It's gate-kept by doctors, the parents, the child begging for them, right? So all this discussion is just pretty. It's the heat that was pumped in by the papers, because it's a really good argument. If you're going to start attacking rights, let's go for the kids, because there'll be parents of kids that aren't trans who are worried about their kids, or they don't want to get them transied. And then you've got the parents who don't know much about it, and then you've got the poor parents who are desperately trying to keep their kids healthy to support them. But the newspapers, the bile, everybody jumping on this because it's the foothold, it's your D-Day, it's your foothold on the beaches to then take everybody's rights. And so they're fighting this ground because that's what's happening in all the red states in America. You look at the Erin in the Morning map of trans healthcare for children, and all the red states are going darker and darker and darker on the right as most of them get taken away from the trans kids. And most of them are moving on, Florida, Texas, onto adults, which is the next step of the battle.
Yeah. And it's not just that they're moving on. I mean, they're taking rights away from minority groups and from women, left, right, and centre, and from other members of the LGBTQIA plus community. I mean, this is something that we can see as clear as day that is happening in front of us, and it's shocking beyond belief to me that to have this Labour government coming in, saying they're going to make it easier to get a gender recognition certificate.
So that doesn't mean it means nothing if we can't use it for anything.
Saying it's going to be easier to they're going to get rid of conversion therapy and including the T in that. There was a comment, someone saying the manifesto for trans people is good, but they are frustratingly stuck on the CAS review being the definitive authority on the matter, which it certainly isn't. But before we go on, Puninator's dropped £5 into super chat. Thanks very much, Puninator. I was about to come to your comments, but you've done it as a super chat now, so I have to stop. Rachel, I've discorded you a copy of an email I've sent to my new MP concerning streeting. I'd appreciate your thoughts on it when you get the chance.
It's right there. Thank you. I will definitely take a look.
Stuff.
So what I would have done, so there's two good things. There's a great video that I discovered, one that Puninator gave to me, actually, which is the science and controversy of transgender healthcare. It's really good, and it was a good recommendation. I'm sure that Puninator might drop it in the chat, the link. And it's with a really good doctor. It's on a series called Dr. Mike, but the doctor that is a trans care expert is called Jack Turbin. And he talks about sport, trans kids, trans healthcare. It's 3 hours long, so bite chunk it, but it's brilliant. It's one of the best ones I've seen. And the Dr. Mike plays a little bit, he's a little bit gender critical, purposely just playing that role, asking all the questions that people have. And then the guy that does the healthcare answers them. And so that's really good. Now, the second point I wanted to make about the puberty, what Wes should have done was like, take a breath, sleep on it, have a think. Because as I've said, lots of people are waving this report around as if it's the blueprint. But there's another great video. What this report is now subject to is peer review because it's out there. It's a scientific piece of work.
Right.
And it's getting peer reviewed. And there's another great video on YouTube by a scientist who's trans. So go to Bridget Empire. And she she's a bit of a scientist. Another long video. We do like long videos when we're trans. And she did a really good one it's called J.K. Rowling Debunked, but it's peer review and the cash review. And it's talking about this report is now going to get peer reviewed by other scientists. And I think that what Bridget's conclusion is it's not going to come out well in the long run. So But that's what Wes should have done. Wes should have taken, if I'd been Wes String, sit down with a trans parent and a trans child, several more if you like, and what the hell's going on with their care? What do they need? What's happening? What's it like? Get that experience. Then, secondly, maybe get an independent review of the cash review. Maybe the cash review is right. I don't know. But get an independent review of that report. Maybe get a medical judge
just to go back onto something we said earlier. So the cash report was basically commissioned by the same people who commissioned that report that said there's no racism in Britain.
Yeah. I can't remember who the commissioner was. Did it come out of the Equality and Human Rights Commission? I can't remember the commissioner.
No, I don't think. I was just talking about the Tory party.
Yeah, I love it. So yeah, I like see what you did there. See, it's the bleeding obvious I can't do, Graham. I can do complicated. So I think that I would get the report peer reviewed. Get a tribunal to look at it. Get a medical judge to go through it. Just to look at it. But for God's sake, talk to some trans people in the don't go, we're going to accept care. We're going to accept CAS. Boom. We're just going to implement it. That was what? Just a minute. You don't know anything about this. You didn't commission this report. This wasn't your government that did this. This was came from a government that hates trans people. Your government's meant to like us. Could you think you could commission your own report or get this one? And that was where I think secondly, private, most people have, those who are wealthy enough to go private care, that gives people an option, right? There is money privilege right there, but it gave some people an option. And to ban that, even though that was probably the nastiest thing that Victoria Atkins did on the door when the Russians were coming up the driveway, I think that was, wow, why? Where's your evidence for that route? Because CAS didn't ban them.
Yeah.
So why are you doing it for private? What is your? So it just feels like he's been nobbled in some way by some group somewhere that's probably promised some donoring or something. I don't know. It feels, what the hell are you doing? Because you're a gay man. You worked for Stonewall. Why are you turning on the community?
Sarah in the chat is saying he leapt on the answer because he's a massive TERF. An expression that I don't like because I don't feel like the people who hate trans people are feminists in any way, shape, or form, especially their attitude towards. If you can't have it both ways, you can either say, I'm here for the rights of women, and I'm not going to accept the idea that trans women are women in my thing. Okay, so trans men are women, right? That's what you think. If you think that whatever you're stuck with, whatever you were given at birth, you're stuck with that for the rest of your life. No matter how you look or how you feel or how you behave, you are stuck with that for the rest of your life. So how about sticking up for some trans men?
Yeah.
And when you say, "Oh, can a man have a uterus?" Yeah. Well, a trans man can.
Yeah.
What about trans men using toilets? Are you going to make someone who looks like me use the women's toilets? That puts women in danger.
Yeah.
The trans man in danger, but also it puts women in danger because if you are so minded to be a sex offender and you look like a man, because you are a man, you can just walk into the women's toilets and say, legally, I am a woman because this is my birth certificate, kind of a little forgery, and I have a right to be in here and abuse people, attack people, look over the top of the cubicles. I don't think you're allowed to do those illegal things. I don't think there's any certificate in the world that gives you the right to do those illegal things unless you're Donald Trump and you've been given that certificate by your cronies in the Supreme Court.
Yeah. And that's the arguments that it's all the what ifs with trans. It's not what ifs with anything else, but it's what if a trans person does. What if a trans person, we can't let them go into Florida. They might still, Elon Musk's rocket and go to the moon and then build a space station and go to Mars and get there first.
When did this single sex space start? I mean, I know they have single sex carriages on the trains in Egypt and in India. Thing, right? They have single sex restaurants in Saudi Arabia, but I don't want to be like those places.
I think, this brings us on to the other things that Wes has said, that, trans women, even with a gender recognition certificate, don't have a right to single sex spaces. So what he's saying that is, they could put sex in the Equality Act, which they don't need to do because the Equality Act works. Harriet Harman has confirmed that. But if they did put Sex and the Equality Act, that would exclude trans people from single-sex spaces, including toilets. So how do I travel to see my relatives? I can get to the airport and get on a plane and use the loo on the plane. I just can't use the loo at the airport.
No,
that is just ridiculous. So so I can't go on holiday.
So if you're on the Trans-Pennine Express, right, which is kind of trans-friendly in a way because they have single-sex, unisex toilets, but if all of the toilets aren't working, which happens quite a lot on the Trans-Pennine Express, as anyone who's ever travelled on that miserable service can testify, when the train stops for an extra 5 minutes in Huddersfield so everyone can run off the train and quickly go to the toilet, you wouldn't be able to go to the toilet in Huddersfield.
No.
Because that's
the problem. It is. And how would you even police that? Because that, this is like, this supposedly these feminist, anti-trans feminists. I know we're not called feminists, but you're then saying, right, it's not genital inspection, but you're then saying non-traditional women, if you don't look like you don't look like Doris Day of the 1950s, you're not coming in this loo. There's misogyny and anti-feminism right there, because you're making a judgment on how feminine somebody looks. So and as you know, more non-trans women get chucked out of loos than trans women. So it's against feminism to do that. One of the stalwarts of feminism is it doesn't matter how you look. If you want to shave your head, then you can. That's fine. And you are still a woman, and you shouldn't feel like less of a woman because you don't look traditionally feminine. And when we talk about gender affirming surgery and saying, oh no, we shouldn't allow that. Are we going to ban boob jobs? Because that's gender affirming surgery. Are we going to ban men from having hair transplants? Because that's gender affirming surgery, boys and girls. I mean, it's just... By the way, how is the hair transplant going? Is it going okay?
Not so great. Not so great. The beard's going great, like, and the pubes, fantastic. But it's always, the stuff on my head.
It's always the way, isn't it?
I miss my flowing ginger locks.
Hair sprouts out of everywhere, but on your head. It's really annoying.
I'm very glad I had flowing ginger locks when I could have them. I'm glad that I took that opportunity. And I've got those photos now, and they're not AI.
You see, inside your head, there's thousands and thousands of little cotton reels with lots of hair on you. So because you had your hair long when you were young, whole life worth. Anya
in the chat, very good point. Ban Viagra.
Yeah.
No one ever wants to ban Viagra. The Project 2025 don't want to ban Viagra.
No, shocker.
Sarah S, thank you very much for the £2 super chat. What about Baroness Faulkner's comments on gender recognition certificates?
So I mean, she said so much. And what I'm hoping, we'll jump ahead because I wanted to talk about the Equality and Human Rights Commission, because obviously one thing Labour could do is that institution has been heavily criticised. It was reported by 20 LGBT organisations to GANRI, the United Nations Board. They're going to do a sort of review, and they might lose their grade A status, which means they haven't conformed to what's something called the Paris Principles standard of care.
Wow.
And therefore they would lose their status and therefore their gravitas on the world stage. And they've been, they're in a bit of a mess. You've also seen, if you look at the Caroline Noakes Committee, Women Equalities Committee, you hear that a lot of young people left the Equality and Human Rights Commission. There's been aspects of bullying and all that other stuff that's come out in the newspapers. It's not a great. So what Labour could do to fix that problem? I mean, they obviously released some single-sex guidance for workplaces that Robin White has clearly said in an article. If you followed it as a company, you might get into trouble. That it wasn't. They also suggested to the government put Sex and the Equality Act, which was criticised in ILGA's report, and I think it was on worldwide LGBT, European LGBT. So they're not being particularly. And obviously the U-turned on self-ID in Ireland, in Scotland, after supporting it for so long, and they suddenly been no, we don't support that after supporting it for quite a long time. So what I think what needs to happen is that Harriet Harman is reappointed as head of the Equality and Human Rights, and she needs to fix it because it doesn't work. The report.
She's a trans ally, so that'll be a great move.
She wrote the Equality Act, right? And she already knows that it works for single-sex spaces. You can turn a trans person away from a single-sex space under the Equality Act now. You don't need to. So get a new head. Get rid of some of the senior managers that seem to have following the instructions. But the fact is, it needs a revamp. It needs to become more independent from the government again. That's what it was set up to be. And it hasn't been. The whole stuff on there's no racism in the UK that they produce and all that stuff. It's just, come on, it's something wrong with the Equality and Human Rights Commission. So it needs, that would fix that. And I think then we would, and then they could go to meaning reassuring women that trans people aren't a risk to them, balancing out the inclusive feminism and try to take the heat out and balance it. There needs to be reassurance to women that trans people are not a risk to them. And that was the discussions that were going to happen in 2016, but never happened because some right-wing government came in and poured petrol over it all. And we never got to have those discussions of reassurance and acceptance. And the fact is, and those arguments that people are attacking trans people are the same people that want to attack women. So those arguments were never made properly. So I think the Equality and Human Rights Commission needs a revamp, in my view.
I couldn't agree more. But I also think that, that this whole thing of trans people present a threat, this lie that's been trotted out by J.K. Rowling and Graham Linehan and all these other little bog trolls is something that they should be prosecuted over for spreading this bullshit, and it's bigoted bullshit. Unfortunately, it seems like trans people aren't a protected group like Jews are, or black people are, or people from Pakistan are, in terms of, if I said something like that, if I said all Jews are X, I would be quite rightly done for anti-Semitism, done for hate speech, done for big, but that doesn't seem to exist for trans people. We
don't have the rights.
Bastion of bigotry is to be able to say what you like and say, oh, you can't trust them, they'll attack you. They're more likely to be, and it's going down that same route, as was said in the chat earlier. In the 1980s, gay men, when I was growing up in Liverpool in the 80s, the exact same arguments were being used against gay men.
But the only slight difference, because I was there for Section 28 and HIV, the only difference is social media. The papers are less independent than they were before, and they were horrible then. And there's a lot of people in the LGBT community attacking trans people as well, because there have been organizations set up to get them to hate us. So some of the biggest cruelties come from LGBT members of the community. And that is, and yet they're next because it's on the route map, right? So, I criticized some gay celebrities, who got, so when Boris was going to suddenly wasn't going to ban LGBT conversion therapy. And then there was a kickoff by a lot of LGBT people. Boris came back and said, I'll ban it for LGBT people. A lot of gay celebrities were like, fab, we're out here. Thanks a lot. Brilliant. LGBT people didn't care that trans people have been thrown under the bus, and they say nothing on trans. They're not being, there's a lot of gay LGBT friends I've got are fantastic allies. They are brilliant, but there's so many that are just, why are you attacking us? Because the plan is you next. And we know that. So that really upsets me.
But then there's gay men who have a problem with lesbians. There's a lot of gay men who have a problem with bisexual people because they haven't made their mind up yet, apparently. You'll find that you'll have more arguments if you're bisexual with your gay friends than you will with your straight friends. Weird but true. Sorry to anyone in the chat who's offended by me saying that, but in my experience as well.
It is it's divide and conquer. Get the T away from LGB. It weakens, because we were at Stonewall riots, right, chucking bricks as well. So we are an ally to LGB people. We are LGB people as well. But if you break the T away, LGB people are exposed. Their rear flank is not there, and they'll burn through the letters and onto women just like that. And that's the problem. It's divide and conquer. And getting our own community to attack each other is genius. It's evil genius. I cannot believe I get attacked by lesbians and gay people. And I just can't believe that happens, but it does.
Well, and Wes is gay. Don't do that saying when they came for ... Yeah, exactly.
It is. It pick them off and get us to fight each other. If trans people, LGBT people as a community, women and in feminist networks, gender networks, black networks, disability networks, all pulled together, they wouldn't be able to do a thing to us, but we don't.
I'd like to highlight a comment because we've got 10 minutes left.
From let's get Lucy. Through. You've been slowing me down.
From Lucy asking, are there any silver linings? Now, I would like to have a crack at that first. Yes, in the way that there were silver linings to Brexit, in that it made people appreciate how much they wanted to be in the EU and how much they appreciated what the EU did, something that was just sort of trundled away in the background of our lives and we didn't really we didn't appreciate it as much as we should. I think the same thing has happened with trans people. Trans allies in the last few years have really stepped up and started saying, hang on, what's going on here? Why are you conflating feminism with transgender, transphobia, essentially? So that's what I would say is a silver lining, but more on the sort of Labour policy and Labour going forward. Could you answer that question?
It's a hard one to answer because I have bad and good days, as you know, when I'm in the chat, when I'm in the politics social chat. You have to hope that, they always say inclusion is an arc and it can be wide or short, and it's very long at the moment. I thought that Labour would be the firewall, and they're not. I mean, I don't think they're going to do a great deal for us, sadly. However, there are lots of things that could happen. The next government, maybe Keir gets scared at the approach of the next election, and he starts to become, he might need progressive left, Green, and the Liberal Democrats, they're much more progressive. Maybe then that affects policy. I think I've also read an article today about a sort of a new left appearing, like Farage did to the Conservatives. There's a new left will form on the left to do to Labour what Farage did to Tories, and that might form up, and that would be expected to be LGBT inclusive, because it would be a lot of LGBT people that will form that new left. So the next election could be something we can't see yet. There's a lot of LGBT. Obviously, 28% of Generation Z are LGBTQI. Now, only was it 60% of them voted? I mean, that's why Labour got in. I mean, bloody hell. But only, obviously, not. It needs to be more, and they're getting more and more affected by this as well. I think I do have hope that will change. I think that the fact is that if America falls, I mean, people, where will they do next? I think they're going to put a big wall up and go full Handmaid's Tale, and we're not going to see them for 20 years. I don't think they're going to affect us as much as people think. I think they're just going to go isolationist. I think we need to get closer to the European Union, because we're going to need NATO, and we're going to get stronger, and we need those. So that might be a good thing. It might drive us towards the European Union, and we need that because their diversity rules are a lot tighter. So there's lots of silver lining strands. I can't see where the win is at the moment. I just think we've all got to keep walking towards the guns. I think every trans and non-binary person I know is fighting. A lot of the LGBT community is fighting. Our allies are fighting. This channel's pro-trans. I have lots and lots of conversations every day. I talk to lots of audiences all the time, and especially in organizations. Now, they're not shouting about it outside their walls, because obviously they don't want to get attacked in the media, but they're doing loads of work on it. They're recruiting trans and non-binary people. They're giving them healthcare more than ever. So I think there is a gathering of, and I think that I am seeing LGBT groups, gender networks coming a little bit more together. And I've seen the LGBT network pull a little bit tighter together, for not the ones that are attacking us, but I'm seeing lots of green shoots. And it's amazing what happens when you are facing a full fash government, right? We got rid of ours. France got rid of theirs for a short while. There might be hope in America if they flip Biden out, but I think there's always hope, and I think we'll get there. I just think it's, at the moment, it's not that we're not going to get there with Labour. I'm just really disappointed. I'm so disappointed. I'm having trouble seeing the green suits because of what Labour's done. The green. That was just the last thing. There are a lot of Labour MPs and there are a lot of Labour members kicking the crap out of Labour over this right now.
That's what I was just about to say. I was going to say people have kicked off about it. It's not like everyone's gone, oh, it's fine. You've got a landslide victory. You do what you like. You go crazy, guys. They haven't done that. They've said this is wrong. We've got MPs saying it's wrong. Stella Creasy and other MPs saying this is bang out of order. And obviously we've got the court case going through. Someone was asking about the court case. That's still happening. But
so the arguments have been given. Now we're waiting.
Yes. And it's not looking good for our side of this argument, by the way. It's not looking like it's actually going to win in court, because the government can basically do what it likes. But one of the other things that Labour, I hope, do, wasn't in the King's speech, but fingers crossed, is press reform is going for Leveson too. Because if you read about puberty blockers in medical journals, it's a hormone based treatment that's not addictive, that doesn't have as many side effects as other medicines that people take every day, like aspirin, paracetamol, ibuprofen, you name it. And it is completely reversible. Once you stop taking puberty blockers, you start having puberty. And that's been the case for everyone who's taken it for 40 years. And I don't think there's been a single recorded death as a result of someone being on puberty blockers. There have been deaths as a result of young people who are trans not being able to cope with going through puberty.
Yeah, well, we know the suicide rates, those that think about suicide is, I can't remember, it was around 49, 50%. The self-harm rates, they're incredibly high. I mean, this, if it prevents that, it's got to be a good thing, right? I mean, it's just, it's basically, as I said, this isn't, they don't care about the safety of the drug. They care of the fact that they don't want trans people to exist.
It's being reported, to go back to the media, it's being reported in the Telegraph newspaper as a powerful drug.
Yeah.
Like they've got it up there with heroin. You know, it's a powerful drug. It'll knock you on your ass. It's got all these side effects. Yeah. And it doesn't. It's such a lie. Yeah. And they can get away with it because there's no...
You're right. Pressure, and that's where we came in with the big things they should do. Press reform is definitely got to be done. I mean, I still want, Wes also we didn't say that Wes does want to ban us and, trans people on wards. And one of the things that Labour should be doing is training GPs because they don't know anything about trans care. The trans care we get is good but we've educated our wonderful GP, but they don't know how to treat us. Hospital care of LGBT people needs to be there. But segregation, we're talking about segregation of a part of our society now. And Wes Street, it came out of Wes's mouth that trans people should be segregated. And that came from the last government. And he's saying, we should do that. No, why? And the fact is, if we did get a single room, then they'll be kicking off about, well, trans people get single rooms. They get preferential treatment. I don't like that. They should be in the car park. It is that attitude. Now, Kemi Badenoch obviously changed the rules on planning in new buildings so that there are sexed toilets and no all gender loos, unless there might be some scope to build a super loo, but she didn't call it an all gender loo because she can't possibly say that. Now, Labour need to change that rule back so that building planners can build what they like. Because Superloo corridors in banks, you go down to Canary Wharf, all the banks have Superloos, corridors of them with a sink and a loo in there, and I love those. More of those, then it's like a train. Nobody will fall out over loos. But
we've discussed this before. Architectural sexism. There's always a queue for the women's toilets. Yeah, never a queue for the men's. It's almost as though all architects are men. Just saying.
Yeah, no, you're right. So I think that they need to roll back the single sex guidance from the EHRC. They need to do something at the top of the EHRC. Also, Kemi she set up a website that asked for all the great trans policies in the UK so she can then legislate against them in a way, sort of thing. That's what it looks like. I think that site's still up. I mean, what we now need to do is say, send us all your trans policies and we'll implement them. That's what they need to do. Positive stuff. And we're not seeing that. It's just the ban trans people on single sex wards. We're going to accept the CAS outright. We're going to ban conversion practices. What does that mean? We're going to make the gender recognition act easier. What does that mean? You're going to call it something else and make it shorter so Rachel can spell it with her dyslexia. What are you actually going to do with that act? It doesn't feel, I'm not excited, and I'm actually feeling quite with dread. And I think the green shoots are that the younger generation are coming. I think other parties are more progressive, and I think they're going to get into power because I think Labour's going to shit all their power in the next 5 years. And I think that they need to be much more. I just need to be. But the good. And
I don't think they're going to shit all their power. I think I'm trying to look on the bright side here. My cup is half full.
I'm trans. I can't be bright.
I know. But I feel like Wes Streeting is one person. He has walked into Parliament like Barry Big Bollocks, and he's got everyone's back up by being a bit of a tit about everything. Do you know what I mean? Like,
right. I pray that.
I mean, I've got friends who are working in the NHS who aren't trans. They just don't like him because he's very wedded to the privatisation of parts of the NHS in order to get the waiting list down. But, he doesn't look like he's under much duress having to do that. And also, he does come across as at once maybe a little bit politically naive. He comes across as quite determined in his views rather than... he doesn't come across as someone who uses the Socratic method to come to the best thing. He's a bit idealistic, which we could do without.
He could.
We have 14 years of idealism in our politics, and where's it got us?
Well, it just feels that you're absolutely right, and don't get me wrong, there are a lot of great people in Labour that I know, and they are great, and I hope that you're right. I think the fact is that with Cass, he should have taken a breather and not just accepted it. With single sex, look at the evidence. We know from all the freedom of information, trans people have never hassled anybody on a ward anywhere in the UK, but it felt like he caved to media pressure and maybe some of the think tank pressure. I don't know. It's certainly not the bulk of Labour. I just hope that they do something to counteract that. There's a lot of good activism in Labour, and I just hope that they do something about it. Otherwise, I think they're going to lose the young vote.
Yeah, that's true. I've got a couple of super chats, but first of all, I want to just address a question by, well, it's not a question, but I'm going to ask a question. Dog 4x4 says Pentagon has twice as many toilets as needed. Do you know why that is?
Go on.
Because it was built during segregation, and they had to build twice as many toilets because they had to have the black toilets and the white toilets.
That's interesting, yeah.
They were never used. They were never used in a segregated way, actually, because I think when the president at the time found out that they were going to be segregated, because it's Virginia, isn't it? Is it Virginia or West Virginia? I always get them mixed up. Basically turned up and said, why are there so many toilets? And they said, because we've got to separate the black people from the white people when they go for a piss or a shit. It's very important. Because, black people using a white person's toilet, the earth will cave in or something. Ivan Ambrose has an interesting point to make. Thank you very much for the super chat, Ivan. That's very generous of you. Question: as an advocate for autistic people, I know there are a significant amount of trans people who are also autistic. Am I right in saying there needs to be far more done in this area?
Yeah. So I think that one of the things, Cass, would actually say that actually holistically you should. Obviously, I still feel that the report thinks that being trans is the bad outcome, but there is a good correlation of autism with trans, and but you're not trans because you're autistic, and you're not autistic because you're trans. It just happens to be a correlation of some of the characteristics. That's in my belief, and I think the fact is that there might be when you go to, and that would, to be fair, in Cass, it was kind of saying the holistic clinics where you're autistic, there's treatment for that, and you're trans and there's treatment for that. And it's and that was, I think, where she was trying to go. I think that advocacy for autism is just as challenging in this country. Resources, clinics, understanding, education is as challenging as, and I think that resources need to be put into doing that. So I'm on the spectrum a little bit, and I'm dyslexic. I'm very badly dyslexic, but the treatment for that when I was young was almost non-existent. It's sort of there now, but if you can get it in a long waiting list, it's not funded very well. And I think that this is resourcing challenges and the will to do it. Yeah. And I think if the last government had been in, God help us all, because they were pushing against disability, they were pushing against autism, they were pushing against trans and LGBT. They were that part of their divide and conquer strategy. Yeah. I'm hoping Labour holistically, they don't seem to be great on trans, but they are going to be better on the other stuff. One hopes. But
the word that the TERFs like to use is, bog trolls like to use is immutable. Immutable. Sex is immutable. And I'm thinking about this. Hang on. Autism is immutable. ADHD is immutable. You don't see a kid who's clearly got ADHD and then you say, hang on, we need to find out what the best treatment for this child is. Shall we refer to the scientific literature? Shall we refer to doctors, healthcare professionals? Or should we go and ask the richest author in the world who has an opinion on it?
Yeah, that was on my list.
Of course we wouldn't. Why would we even think that for a moment? I do have another super chat to do before we go on. Do you want to go on to that in a moment? And I'll just do this other super chat. Number 3, thank you very much for the £20 super chat. That's very kind of you, Richard.
Thank you.
Legend. I have long said we need a public honesty law whereby only accurate statements are allowed. I imagine there could be complications, but the current situation is insane. Yeah, well, the duty of candor which has been said in the King's speech. That's really important. Also, Sarah, just in the chat, Sarah White saying none of them are speaking up. Stella Creasy is speaking up, and Nadia Whittam is speaking up. Zana, Zara Sultana, they're speaking out against this, and they will speak out in Parliament.
They will, and they have been. And I didn't mean to poo-poo Labour. I just think that they're going to lose the young vote if they don't do something. And those voices, Wes is a Secretary of State in the cabinet. And you know, the other
I think he's going to last very long.
I hope so. You're right. I just think that, you know, he carries a lot. He wields a lot of power at the moment. He wields a lot of power at the moment, and I think it's, you know, and Wes has got Angela Rayner on one side, who's very pro-trans, and Rachel Reeves I don't think is. And so you've got that whole balance. You know, who's speaking to him in the corridor? Which voices is he listening to? And that's what I'm worried
voices
about.
In his head, Rachel. Do you know what they say? They say, "Tell him your dad was a tool maker, Kia," and he's like,
"Yeah, oh my God." I do think we did mention the Section 28 in schools, that guidance. I mean, I was trying to research how far that had got. You know, did they actually implement the 72 genders being taught to school kids, all that stuff?
For God's sake.
I didn't. I mean, there was no evidence. That was poo-pooed, and that never had happened.
72 genders.
That was absolutely poo-pooed. But I wanted to know where they got to that. I didn't have time to pull that bit up. But also, we need to look at the Culture Secretary needs to be working with sporting bodies to say, try to include trans people, follow the science, because obviously Nadine Dorris said, just exclude trans people. We need to make sure, because obviously darts, chess, and snooker is not, you know, trans people are getting banned. Why? Because it's not about fairness. It's about exclusion. So we didn't really talk about intersex recognition, X on passports, non-binary recognition. That should all be there. I do think they need to increase hate crime, and they should do some LGBT training in court. I think they should look at who they issue lobby passes to, because anti-trans campaigners are always lobbying in Parliament. We need to look at that. And I just think we need to improve our worldwide standing on LGBT, because we're number 16, 17 for LGBT rights, 23 for trans, when we used to be number 1. And the Council of Europe listed us as a country of concern, and compare it just to Russia a few years ago. We need to do something about that. So Labour need to improve our world standing on it, because we suck.
Well, I was just thinking about, so I've got a friend who's got cystic fibrosis, and she needs Creon, which is one of the medicines that's critically, I'm trying to think of the right word here, difficult to get in the UK at the moment. And this is a problem that's been exacerbated by Brexit, of course. Yeah. And so this is a medicine that people need. I think it works someone's going to correct me in the chat, I'm sure, but I think it works on the pancreas. And people need this drug to stay alive. And the Tory government, through their policies, have now basically ensured that people are going to die, because they're not going to be able to get enough of this stuff into the country, to go round. And they're already having to cut down the amount of it that you can get hold of. There is no national database for medicines. So your local chemist could have 20 boxes of this stuff, and there's no way of knowing it. The only national database is Boots. So if you can find it in a Boots store anywhere in the country, and you've got a mate who can actually go there in person and get the prescription for you, then you might be able to stay alive for a few more months. But in this case, puberty blockers are not vanishingly rare. They're not something that are hard to get hold of. And yet this medicine is being taken away when we can't stress this enough. For the children who need it, it can be life-saving.
It is life-saving. It will stop the self-harm, suicidal thoughts. I mean, that's why so many countries use it. Use them. This is just part of, because we are this little island carved away from the European continent. They're running an American strategy of trans kids, trans adults, same-sex marriage, women's rights, and trans kids is your foothold, and that's why they're attacking it and pumping it up in their media. And that's why Labour do need to make a stand, and I pray that they do. And I pray you're right on. There are some great people in Labour fighting for it, but I do think these comments have been harmful. And but the green shoots are the things I said. I think there will be new parties. I think Labour might get a hold on it. Labour might get a hold of it. I do think that there's a lot more allyship going. There's a lot of young people coming into the space, and they're protesting and they're vocal on climate, on LGBT. There's loads of reasons to be hopeful. It's just they're not joined up at the moment, so I can't see through the fog, but I know there's a lighthouse on the other side of the sea, and I'm heading towards the optimism. But at the moment, we just have to keep pulling together, and that's why this channel is great. And I really, one of the sources of my strength comes from this channel and the socialites, the comments. You look through the comments on conversations like this, and they're always positive. They're never negative. They're often inquiring, but they're always kind, and that's why I do have hope.
Yeah, I feel the same way about the fact that we've got so many great people who joined the chat. And Angleson, thank you very much for the £5 super chat. I'm so fucking sorry. Trans people are still being put through this after a Labour landslide. Bitterly disappointed on this issue so far.
Yeah. And Uncle Phil said, they didn't have to do it.
No.
This is early on. They could have just said, we're going to restore the care. They got taken a few hits early on, and then they moved on. There was so much other stuff going on the papers, and he may not even covered it. But
Don Dudat says, having been educated in the 70s and 80s, we've come a long way on ADHD, dyslexia, autism, etc. Still a long way to go, but we must never go backwards to when those things were punishable. Absolutely. And well, we're going to still be here. We're not going anywhere. We're going to be fighting. And like I said, when we change the name of the channel, we want to be able to hold Labour to account. Before we changed the name, we said we're going to hold them to account.
Yeah, well, I hope I've knocked them a bit,
Yeah.
I wasn't on the Labour social while I was knocking.
But we will continue this conversation, I'm sure. And we'll see how the court case comes out.
Yeah.
Wes Streeting is making a statement to the House tomorrow, apparently. With hopefully there'll be questions put to him and like, why are you being a dick? Hopefully. Did he actually meet with J.K. Rowling, or did he offer to?
I was going to ask you that, because the indications were that he had, but my partner fan said no, I don't think he has. I mean, I think they put the choice out there. Billionaire authors need to be consulted on everything, as you know. So
that's a big thing over the weekend, wasn't it? With people saying, "I've got a sore back. Can you tell me what the richest author in the world? What medicine I should take for
it?" Yeah,
because I'd rather consult her than my doctor, any healthcare professional, the data.
Yeah,
the best practice in other countries. But anyway, Rachel, we're gonna have to leave it at that. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome, and thank you everybody for the lovely comments and everything. Thank you.
Yeah, and I want to second that as well. Thank you so much for the lovely comments. Thank you for the super chats. Give us a like on the way out, and until next time, Uncle Phil will be back at 9:30 tomorrow morning for Morning Brew. So look out for that. And until then, I'll say hello, good evening, welcome, and goodbye.